Glad to see you on the screen, though virtually. We're really happy. I am your today's English teacher, Mr. Elham Hossain, and I am the Associate Professor of Department of English, Dhaka City College. Dhaka City College has arranged online class program for your benefit to keep you tuned with your studies. I hope you will be benefited by the program that is introduced by our college authority. I welcome you to my class today. I like to discuss today right form of verbs. And I think it is an important topic. And particular topic, you have to have some ideas of some other topics, and this basic knowledge will help you to achieve efficiency in this particular topic. So today I like to discuss right form of verbs, and for your sake, at the very beginning, I will discuss the lesson plan, that is how we will proceed towards our goal, that is the goal of achieving efficiency in this particular topic, that is right form of verbs. So I like to share the screen with you. The screen, I like to share that screen with you. So please look at this lesson plan. Dear students, for your sake, I like to tell you that at first I will discuss these particular things for your sake. You will try to understand very minutely, and if you have any questions towards the end of my class, I will give you a question and answer session, and there you may question me. So please look at the lessons to be discussed today. So we will learn today the definition of verb, then the classification of verbs, that is finite verb, non-finite verb. Then we should know phrase, clause, tenses. And then we will come to the rules of right form of verbs. And after learning some rules, we will have a test whether we have learned all the things that I have discussed or not. For that reason, I will give you some exercises and we will practice. Just come to the first topic, finite. What is finite? The idea of finite verb is very important, because whenever you are going to make a sentence, you must know finite verb, because this very particular verb will help you produce sentences or prepare sentences. And when you will try to prepare simple sentence, complex sentence, or compound sentence, you must know the use of finite verbs and non-finite verbs. Otherwise, you may not produce sentences correctly. Now, please look at the screen. Finite verb. What is a finite verb? Actually, in Bangla, we call it Samapika Kriya. But in English, we call it limited. Limited means Shimabadha. So the verb which is limited. Limited by what? Limited by the number and person of the subject and the rules of tenses. For example, now come to this example. The example here. I ask him to do the work. Now come to the second example. Sadia asks him to do the work. And third example, Sadia asked him to do the work. Now, if you think of this verb, ask, I ask him, or Sadia asks him, or Sadia asked him, then just look at the changes. In the first sentence, the subject is first person singular. So the verb does not take S or ES form. And you know that this sentence is in present indefinite tense. But if you think of the second sentence, the subject is Sadia. And you know it's the name of a girl. So it is third person. And Sadia is singular number. And this sentence belongs to present indefinite tense. For that reason, we have added S to the main verb, that is ask. So it has become asked. And if you come to the third sentence, Sadia asked him to do the work. Just look at this verb. So why does this verb change? Because this sentence belongs to past indefinite tense. As it is past indefinite tense, the verb becomes asked. Now look at the other verbs of these three sentences. Suppose in the first sentence, to do. In the second sentence, to do. In the third sentence, to do. So this verb does not change. I have written Sadia asks, but I do not write here does. Then I have written asked here, but I do not write here did. So ask, this verb changes on the basis of the number and person of the subject and the rules of tenses. So we call it finite verb. Okay. So why do we call it a finite verb? It is finite, or it is limited by the number and person of the subject and the rules of tenses. For that reason, we call it finite verb. Okay. Now, similarly, if you come to the definition of non-finite, what is a non-finite? Non-finite means not finite. The verb which is not finite. Finite means limited. That is the verb which is not limited. So limited by what? Limited by the number and person of the subject and the rules of tenses. So if you think of this example, that is, I ask him to do the work. Then Sadia asks him to do the work. To do does not change. The tense changes. The main verb or finite verb changes, but this verb does not change. As this verb does not change, we call it non-finite. So finite verb is limited and non-finite verb is not limited. Limited by what? By the number and person of the subject and the rules of tenses. Okay. Now come to the forms of non-finite verb. You may question me after seeing all these three examples, that the non-finite verb, should non-finite verb always start with to? No, it is only one of the forms of non-finite. Non-finite verb has got several forms. The first one is present participle. Present participle is a form of non-finite verb. Now, what is the structure of non-finite present participle? Base form of verb plus ing. That is, you have to add ing to the base form of verb. Now, come to the example. I saw the bird fly. I saw the bird fly. Here, saw is the finite verb. If you think of the finite verb here, saw is the finite verb here. And if you think of flying, flying is a non-finite verb here. And it is in present participle form. Now, present participle form does the function of adjective. Present participle form of non-finite. Hello. Hello. Present participle of non-finite verb does the function of adjective. For example, I saw the bird fly. So flying, if you try to understand the structure of flying, then you can easily find that fly plus ing. So fly is the base form of verb. Base form means present form. And then ing, flying. So structurally it is present participle. Now what function does it do? It does the function of adjective. It does the function of adjective. How? Because it shows the condition of the bird. So I saw the bird in what condition? In flying condition or flying situation. For that reason, flying is doing the function of adjective. Okay. So present participle is a non-finite verb. It is a form of non-finite verb. Now come to the next one. Past participle form. Now past participle form also does the function of adjective. Now example, heat absorbed from the sun cooks our food. Now if you think of this verb absorbed, it is doing the function of adjective. And if you think of its form, it is past participle. Heat cooks our food. These very portions are sufficient to give a meaning. But then what does this very part uh, or how does this very part help us? This very part is doing the function of adjective because it shows the quality or it qualifies heat. So what type of heat cooks our food? The heat which is absorbed from the sun can cook our food. Okay. For that reason, we call it non-finite verb, and this is doing it is in the form of past participle. Okay. Now come to the third form of non-finite verb, infinitive. What is infinitive? Infinitive is a form of non-finite verb, and its structure is 2 plus base form of verb. 2 plus base form of verb. Now, example, teacher asks me to do my homework. So here non-finite verb, to do. This is in the form of infinitive. So this is non-finite verb. And which is the finite verb here? Asks. So thus we find that non-finite verb has got several forms: present participle, past participle, and infinitive. Now infinitive may be bare infinitive or zero infinitive. If to remain silent in infinitive, then we will call it bare infinitive. And after some particular verbs, to remains silent. Suppose let, did, find, or see, need, help. After these particular verbs, to remain silent. For example, let me go. We do not say let me to go. We say let me go. So let is here doing the function of finite verb. And the subject of this sentence is remaining silent. For example, you let me go. But you remains here silent. Let is doing the function of a finite verb. And go, this is bare infinitive or zero infinitive. Similarly, the next example, he helps me to do the work. To do, we do not say to do, we usually say he helps me do the work. So as we find here helps as finite verb, we do not use to in the infinitive. So to remains here silent. So as to remains here silent, we call it bare infinitive or zero infinitive. So while you will go to solve the exercises of right form of verbs, you must keep all these things in your mind. Otherwise, only from your assumption, or if you only guess the answers and try your fate, then I think you may be in trouble. You should have very clear ideas of all these things. Otherwise, it is very, very difficult to choose the correct form of verb. Now, another thing that you must know, suppose phrase, the idea of phrase. What is phrase? Phrase is a group of words. Phrase is a group of words, and it has no subject and no finite verb, giving incomplete meaning and doing the function of a particular verb. So phrase is not a single word. This is the basic difference between a word and a phrase. A word is a single unit. On the other hand, a phrase is a group of words. For example, Nasrin is a brilliant student. Here, Nasrin is the subject, is here principal verb. Most of the students call it auxiliary verb because they memorize a list of some auxiliary verbs and is belongs to that very list, and they very promptly, without thinking much, they call it principal auxiliary verb. Actually, it's wrong. The name of a verb or the identity of a verb is defined by its behavior in a sentence or by its function in a sentence. You must keep it in mind. A verb is not named by its appearance. A verb is named by its function in a sentence. Suppose if I say he is playing, here is an auxiliary verb. But if I say he is a student, here is a principal verb. So Nasrin is a brilliant student. Nasrin is the subject here, is principal verb. A brilliant student, this is complement. Most of the students call it an object, and they are habituated to call anything after verb object. It's wrong. Actually, you have to understand the behavior of the part that comes after the verb. A brilliant student, it analyzes Nasrin. So who is Nasrin? A brilliant student. And a brilliant student, who? Nasrin. So a brilliant student, this very part of this sentence is analyzing the subject. For that reason, we call it a complement. Now, this complement is a group of words. A brilliant student. We find here three words, and these three words have constituted a single unit. For that reason, we call it a phrase. And just find that there is no subject in this group of words. Subject is Nasrin, and Nasrin is out of this group. There is no finite verb here. Finite verb is outside this group of words. And a brilliant student, it gives us incomplete meaning. A brilliant student. If I utter this group of words, a brilliant student, then you may question me, who is a brilliant student? So it cannot give us complete meaning. And the last of all, a brilliant student, this very group of words is doing the function of noun here. It is doing the function of what? It is doing the function of noun. Because this group of words is introduced by a determiner, A. If a group of words is introduced by a determiner, suppose A and B, then it usually does the function of a noun. So, a brilliant student, it is a phrase. He was a lion-hearted man. A lion-hearted man, it is also a phrase because it's a group of words and it gives us incomplete meaning, and it is doing the function of a particular part of speech. Okay. So I think you have got some ideas of phrase, finite verb, non-finite verbs. Now clause. The idea of clause is very, very important because if you try to analyze a compound sentence or a complex sentence or a complex compound sentence, then you have to have some ideas of different kinds of clauses. And I hope and believe you have sufficient ideas of clauses. Now, what is clause? Clause is a part of a sentence with a subject and a finite. So a clause is a part of a sentence. Don't get confused. A phrase is also a part of a sentence. A clause is also a part of a sentence. Then what is the basic difference between a phrase and a clause? You know, in a phrase, there is no subject, no finite. But in a clause, you will find a subject and a finite verb. And it is a part of a sentence. Now look at this example. I have a pen which is red. So we find here two clauses. I have a pen which is red. I have a pen, it's a clause because we find here one subject, I, and one finite verb. And in the next part, which is red, here we find another subject, which, and finite verb is. So in each part of this sentence, we find one subject and one finite verb. For this reason, we call it a clause. So a clause is a part of a sentence which has only one subject and one finite. So a phrase is different from a clause. Phrase is also a part of a sentence, but it does not have a finite verb. It does not have a subject. On the other hand, clause is a part of a sentence, and it has one subject and one finite verb. Okay. Now, clause is basically divided into three kinds. Principal clause or main clause. It is also called independent clause. Then subordinate clause and coordinate clause. Principal clause or main clause is independent because it does not depend on other clause to give complete meaning. A principal clause gives complete meaning without depending on other clause. Subordinate means dependent. Subordinate means dependent. So subordinate clause depends on other clause. You must not say subordinate clause depends on principal clause. Why? Because sometimes it is found that subordinate clause depends on a coordinate clause. If you find a complex compound sentence, or if you find a big sentence, then you will find that subordinate clause depends on sometimes a coordinate clause. So subordinate clause is a clause which depends on other clauses. And coordinate clause is introduced by coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunction, suppose but is a coordinating conjunction. For example, I repeatedly requested him, but he did not help me. So I repeatedly requested him, this is principal clause. But is a coordinating conjunction, and as this clause is introduced by but, so we call it a coordinate clause. It starts with a coordinating conjunction, so we call it a coordinate clause. All right. So you should, if you want to have sufficient knowledge of different kinds of subordinate clause, you may consult the grammar book written by Rain and Martin, because you will find there different kinds of subordinate clauses: subordinate noun clause, subordinate adjective clause, and subordinate adverb clause. Then for right form of verbs, you must know tenses. You should have some ideas of tenses. And so far, I believe you have some ideas. You have already had some ideas of different kinds of tenses. But I think you should practice the exercises after each tense that is incorporated in my sheet of paper that I will upload in the site of our college very soon. You will find all these materials there. And I request all the students to read all these things in detail and minutely, and then solve the exercises incorporated into these pages. And if you find any difficulties, you must talk to me. Just feel free and talk to me. Now I will take you to our main discussions, that is right form of verbs. I have prepared some rules for you, and I believe if you can read these rules very minutely and try to understand different things there, then I think it will be easier for you to solve the problems. Right form of verbs. In these sheets of paper, I have given you some 38 rules. And I think all these rules are sufficient for you. And if you read these rules, then you can easily solve the problems. But one thing that I will discuss now, especially sequence of tense and the passive form of the verb. That is, when you are given a complex sentence or a compound sentence, most of the students fail to maintain the sequence of tense, and for that reason they cannot obtain marks. So I ask you to be conscious about use of sequence of tense. So what is sequence of tense? Sequence of tense means if you find that in a sentence you have two clauses, and two clauses indicate two actions, and two actions take place at the same time, then you must maintain the same tense. The same tense must be maintained. Otherwise, your sentence will not be correct. For example, the first rule I am reading for you. If the subject is third person singular, বাক্যের subject যদি third person singular না হয়, তাহলে present indefinite tense এ ভার্বের সাথে s by s. You know all these rules. Second rule, present indefinite tense এ বাক্যের subject third person ও singular number হলেও বাক্যটি যদি নেগেটিভ হয় বা ইন্টারোগেটিভ হয়, তাহলে মূল ভার্বের বেস ফর্ম বা প্রেজেন্ট ফর্ম. You know that if the sentence is negative or if the sentence is interrogative, then we use an auxiliary verb. Especially if the subject is third person singular, then we use does in the sentence. So when you use does, then we must not add s or es to the main verb. Very important. Then third rule, there are some adverbs. For example, yesterday, ago, last week, last month, last year, the day before yesterday, or once upon a time, ago. So if these adverbs are there, then you have to use past indefinite tense. Then another rule that I like to discuss in detail for you, passive forms. So when should I use the passive form of the verb? And for that reason, I just like to use the whiteboard. I just like to use the whiteboard for your sake. And so voice or when should we use the passive form of verb in a sentence? When should I use the passive form of a verb in a sentence? It's a very important thing. You know that most of the students do not or cannot decide whether they will use the passive form of the verb or active form of the verb in a sentence. And you may have the problems like this, several problems like this in the text selected by the board for your examinations. So, for example, I just like to give you an example. Suppose I write a verb here, find. It's a verb, and I select a subject here. We find tigers in the forest. It's a sentence. And then tigers find in the forest. বেশিরভাগ ছাত্রছাত্রী যেটা মনে করে যে বাক্যে বাই থাকলেই কেবলমাত্র প্যাসিভ হবে, আর বাই না থাকলে ভার্বের অ্যাক্টিভ ফর্ম হবে। আসলে ভয়েসটা বোঝাই হলো প্রধান ব্যাপার। What is voice? Voice is a form of a verb. By is not important in active voice or passive voice. The form of verb is very important. What is the definition of voice? Voice is a form of a verb. This is very important. Verb কি ফর্মে আছে সেটা আমার বুঝতে হবে, তাহলে আমি বুঝবো যে আমার অ্যাক্টিভ করতে হবে নাকি প্যাসিভ করতে হবে। এখন আমি এই বাক্যে দেখছি ফাইন্ড আছে, ফাইন্ড মানে দেখা। এখন দেখা একটা কাজ, ইটস a verb. Now who is doing this action, or who is doing this work? এই ফাইন্ড করছে কে? আমার সাবজেক্ট এখানে আছে we. So subject is doing this function. If the subject does the function, যদি কোনো ভার্বের দ্বারা বোঝায় যে সাবজেক্ট নিজে কাজ করছে, তখন আমি ওই ভার্বটা অ্যাক্টিভ ফর্মে আছে এটা আমি ধরে নেব। ঠিক একইভাবে if I come to the next example, tigers within brackets find in the forest. Find মানে দেখা। এখন দেখার কাজটা কে করছে? Now which is my subject here? Tigers. Tigers এখানে সাবজেক্ট। এখন টাইগার্স কি ফাইন্ড করছে নাকি টাইগার্স কে ফাইন্ড করা ইন দ্য ফরেস্ট? আমি কিন্তু এখানে বোঝাচ্ছি যে টাইগার ফাইন্ড করছে না, টাইগারকে ফাইন্ড করা ইন দ্য ফরেস্ট। যেহেতু সাবজেক্ট নিজে কাজ করছে না, সাবজেক্টের উপর কাজ আরোপ করা হচ্ছে। The subject is not doing this function. Rather, the function or the action is imposed upon the subject. So we must use the passive form of this verb. Then what should be the correct answer here? Tigers are found. So are found. This should be the answer of this verb. So it is very, very important Most of the students are confused and they question us. তারা জিজ্ঞেস করে স্যার বাক্যে তো বাই নেই, তো এটাকে আমরা প্যাসিভ করব। আসলে প্যাসিভ বা অ্যাক্টিভ চেনার বা বোঝার